Hey, what's up, everybody? BDF44 coming at you with another video. All right, so God's honest truth. This is gonna be funny, but I went to sleep about 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. and it was pitch black in my apartment. You know what I mean? So I knew I went to sleep early. So I had a full-fledged sleep. Felt like I slept through the night. Woke up. I thought it was maybe about 5:30 in the morning. I'm looking at my crypto, looking at stocks and all that nonsense, and look up at the clock, and it's 12 midnight. I'm like, it's still yesterday. Like, what the heck? Anyway, that's not important. Before I went to sleep, I did catch the tail end of the Chicago and the Boston game. I had heard the announcers say that the Boston Celtics were up big in that game and then ended up coughing it up. The Bulls ended up winning by like 10 points. Io DeSumo didn't miss a shot. He looked fantastic. Derrick Jones Jr. is fitting really in off the bench. So the Bulls just, rolled. DeMar DeRozan went for like 37. Zach LaVine, everybody balled out. So the Bulls are rolling good. But the Boston Celtics obviously giving up that game. Marcus Smart was not pleased at the end of that game. I don't have his direct quote, as I never do, but I could paraphrase by saying, he said the scouting report tells everybody that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are going to be getting the ball. You know, they are going to be forced to pass the rock, and if they don't learn that, we go continue to fail. I can only do so much in the corner. That's essentially what he was saying. This is one of those situations. That's exactly what I was talking about. Look, this is the other aspect of why I made the channel. Besides wanting to see basketball players get to a point where they're in good situations and out of bad ones, but it's also about expressing my opinion about the importance of ball movement and facilitators, and then just going into my lingo about um, you know facilitators being like the head of the snake, point guards, facilitators in general, and like the rest of the players on the floor being the pieces that they use to orchestrate the floor, their weapons. And it's just like this: when you don't have a natural facilitator on the floor as one of your stars or one of your main starters, you're going to have ISO game, you're going to have stagnant offense, and you're going to have situations like this. Look, Jason Taylor and Jaylen Brown are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. They're score first players. The problem is, score first players with the ball in their hand do nothing for making others better and do nothing for ball handling unless they make a concerted effort to do so. Meaning, it's foreign. It may not be overly foreign for a scoring player, but they have to think about passing as opposed to it being second nature or it being something that they ultimately do um, by feel a lot of the time. Not everybody has the facilitation feel gene, okay? Just because a guy's a superstar can go for 50, just because a guy is capable of getting 8 assists does not mean that he thinks pass. And you need players on your team that think pass. And I don't think enough of an emphasis is put on that. I've watched teams for many years not to have facilitators on the floor. The Clippers have gone a long time without really having a facilitator since Chris Paul left and Blake Griffin left. Look at the Chicago Bulls, even though they have fantastic facilitators on their team now and have made an emphasis on putting facilitators on this team over the last several years, trying to get facilitators. But they didn't have them for a long time, which is why the Bulls were struggling as bad as they were with players like Markkanen and Kobe White, who I know Markkanen's playing great in Cleveland. And you're going to see Kobe White probably come back and play great when he comes back from injury with all these facilitators who will help him get the rock. You see this situation in various teams all over the league that don't have facilitators, just weapons. And those weapons, what is a weapon by itself without someone to man it? That's essentially what you have when you have shooters on a basketball floor without facilitators. They're trying to create for themselves, and it does not work a lot of the time. ISO ball, ISO ball in 2021, it's an eyesore to me. And even most importantly, it just does nothing for the game. I grew up on Kobe. I grew up on guys like Mike, so I know the emphasis on score first leaders and the championship caliber situations you can find yourself in. The problem is, what made those two superstar scorers able to have cohesive basketball teams that were able to win was the fact that they were able to run systems like the box and the triangle and stuff like that. If you don't have those systems in place by second nature, a whole team full of weapons is going to have a hard time to score cohesively, consistently. And it just is what it is. You need your Ricky Rubios. You need your Ben Simmons, your Lonzo and LaMelos. You need those guys. The Chris Pauls, your DeAndre. Your Green, Draymond Greens. You need these players so they can make your weapons feel as if they're in positions to do what it is that they do best. It shouldn't be on Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown to facilitate. The reality is, the Boston Celtics need Marcus Smart to facilitate, because Dennis Schroeder's not going to do it, Peyton Pritchard's not getting the minutes, and nobody else on that roster outside of Al Horford is going to be pass first. They don't have those players on their roster. So Marcus Smart can scream from the top of the rafters and be pissed off, but it's not the players he needs to be mad at. It's more so management. It's Danny. Danny got to get them a facilitating point guard, man. That's what needs to happen. Dennis Schroeder threw a monkey wrench in an entire situation when he was able to have his value dropped as a shoot-first weapon player playing the point guard position. Does he help them? Of course. He's not a problem. But he doesn't provide that pass-first player. Marcus Smart is a defensive player who is learning how to score as he goes along. He's learning how to put the ball in the hoop. Marcus Smart understands that he's not an offensive juggernaut. Nobody in Boston is asking for Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum to get the ball to Marcus Smart down the stretch, fam. Now, that doesn't mean Marcus Smart can't help you down the stretch. Complete opposite. Marcus Smart's very clutch. Very. On defense and offense. I think he can do good things for you. But the point is, those are the guys you want the ball in their hands. I think what would help, what Marcus Smart opinion is if they had a facilitator getting the ball to all three of them. That's what needs to happen. You don't get on the non-facilitators for not getting you the ball. Y'all need to get that facilitator in place so they can get all of y'all the ball. That's what needs to happen. Excuse me. So, as far as I'm concerned, yeah, do guys need to learn how to pass more? Sure. But more so, it's on the new coach, Udoka, to implement those triangle principles and putting in players like Pritchard and running an offense through Horford so that facilitation can be on the floor at all times, playing Pritchard, putting those players on the floor so that assists can be made, guys can get the ball in their pocket. Excuse me. You want to know why Carmelo Anthony is shooting so well as a Laker? And I've figured this out. It ain't just because Carmelo Anthony is awesome. Carmelo Anthony struggled in other places in conditioning. It's not just that. Carmelo Anthony's getting the ball in his pocket from multiple facilitators for the first time in his career. That's what you're seeing. You're seeing a player who was always great at catch and shoot finally getting an opportunity to receive the ball from others to catch and shoot. Carmelo Anthony has spent the majority of his entire career as a weapon forced to create for himself. No facilitator on the floor at any given time, with the exception of maybe Chauncey Billups and Raymond Felton. Those are the only times he ever played with real facilitators to my knowledge. Call me ignorant because I haven't gone through all the facilitators in Carmelo Anthony's career. But look at the different situations he's been in, with the exception of playing with Russell Westbrook, which was a discombobulated fit at the time because of the presence of Paul George, and the strange fit that they had going on with their offense. But Carmelo hasn't played with a facilitating presence like the collection of facilitating presence the Lakers have. LeBron James, Rajon Rondo, other guys on this team, obviously Russell Westbrook as well. They're getting him the ball. HBK, also known as Austin Reeves, they're getting him the ball in positions to where he can just catch it and shoot it. What I've learned about Carmelo since he's been a Laker is that if he catches it low, if he catches it too high, if it comes in some weird angle, it affects his shot, and chances are it ain't going to go in. But if he catches it in his pocket, oh, his mechanics are so automatic, he's going to shoot 50% from three, and that's exactly what you're seeing. He didn't have a facilitator in New York, y'all. He didn't have a facilitator in Denver. He didn't have a facilitator in Portland. No one put him in a position to get the ball in his most comfortable spots. He's now doing that in year freaking 15. And so I'm trying to tell people, the Knicks failed to get him a facilitator, and his numbers would have been even higher. His winning percentages would have been even better. He would have scored in much better bunches if he would have had this presence of collective of facilitators and players that can get him the ball. He would have been doing this the whole time. And that's what I'm trying to express to you guys. It's so very important that the NBA as a whole and its collective make it an emphasis, as they do with shooting. And they're paying all these shooters all this money, and shooters can't do nothing by themselves. Make sure that you put more of an emphasis on facilitators. You need these guys more than you need shooters. And I'm not saying that shooting ain't important, because a facilitator without a weapon is just a guy passing the rock. That is boring basketball. Don't get it twisted. Overpassing is a thing, and I understand it. But ultimately, if you have no passing, it's just dribble, 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 shoot, and four players thinking the same things that Marcus Smart just said, without actually pointing their anger at the right people. On the court, it's easy to get mad at your brothers, but the reality is your brothers are only doing what they're put there to do, and I don't think that's exactly the thought I'm saying. That your brothers can only do what they're capable of doing. Not to say that they're not capable of passing, but players are players, man. You know, and GMs put prototype players together for a collective vision. So if you don't have the prototype doing the thing that it's supposed to be doing, it's because they didn't have that imagined in the vision for the team, and it should have been there. That doesn't necessarily mean they didn't have it imagined. It just means that they weren't able to facilitate that process to their team, so they don't have that facilitator, so to speak. Either way, it ain't there. So you got to get it. That's it. You got to get it. If you're the Boston Celtics, it's just about running your offense through the guys that can do those things, or implementing triangle offensive principles. At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. You need facilitating. You need ball movement in every situation with every team. When you got a team full of shooters and no ball movement, you're going to have nothing. I don't give a damn how great those shooters are. They're not going to make cohesive plays for each other, and your defense is going to be able to settle in on them, and eventually it's just going to tear you guys apart. I don't care how talented you are. That is what Boston is running into. And I think it's just something over time they'll figure out. I don't think nobody's going to look at Marcus Smart and say we need to trade him because of this. I really don't. I don't think he's saying I want out of here because of this. I think he's just frustrated in the moment because he wasn't getting the ball, because there was no facilitators on the floor to make that happen. So that's what it is, man. Marcus Smart will, I'm sure he understands everything I just said. I don't think this is some type of revelation for the players involved. I just think it gets to a situation where you're frustrated because you know you don't have those things, and you're expecting your brothers to emphasize maybe doing some things that don't come naturally to them if the game dictates it, and it's like you got to sacrifice. I'm not sure which play he was referring to. I don't, my mind didn't retain all of that right now, and I didn't watch highlights before making this video rather. But at the end of the day, the Boston Celtics coughed up a big lead, which means they had a big lead against a very good team. That's encouraging. And I always say that when you find yourself blowing a 30-point lead or blowing a 25-point lead, remember that you actually got one. You know what I mean? And so you just got to try to figure out what it was you were doing in that first half of the game that you weren't doing in the second. And if it was outside of your control, then you don't hold your hat on the fact that you should be kicking your butt about what happened there. You just burn the tape and move on. So at the end of the day, my mindset, if I'm the Boston Celtics, is to burn the tape and move on. And for the coach, Udoka, he's a young coach, man, and that's what it is. The Boston Celtics have a very new coach in place for the first time in several years. So the adjustment for him to implement his coaching style and for them to adjust to that coaching style, not to mention him being a rookie coach, which means that there's going to be a learning curve for him, preseason-ish type of stuff for him in the early season because it's his first year. You got to let him get his feet wet. You got to let him get his principles set. You got to let him figure out what he needs to figure out. If you're going to be frustrated with a new coach right off top, the coach ain't the problem, it's you. You just got to let him figure out what he's going to do. And if you're not going to let him figure out what he's going to do, then don't hire a rookie coach. Hire somebody that you know what they've done, and let them do that. But I don't think Boston Celtics made a mistake. I don't think they feel they've made a mistake. I don't even see a problem. I just think that at this point, you just got to let him do his job and let him figure out his roster, learn his roster, whatever needs to be done. I don't know. But it's going to take some time for him to get everything going. And I personally think, he's doing a solid job, because what I'm seeing is a resurgence in Al Horford. Now, Al Horford ain't played like this in years. So whatever Udoka's doing, he's definitely getting the most out of a player that I think is going to be key for them. So as long as that's happening, I think the Boston Celtics can stabilize, because at the end of the day, it's just about health and ultimately developing the players that have not been developed over the last several years for that particular team. So, the Romeo Langfords, players like that, I want to see them get more minutes. I know Romeo had some time tonight, didn't really do as much with that time as I was hoping to see, being that I've been screaming his name a lot to get minutes, but ultimately it's good to see him get that time. Peyton Pritchard as well. I just want to see those players get more time. And I think if they do that and develop those guys to their proper level, I think the team will be one of the deepest teams in the league, and these issues will not sustain. I'm not overreacting once again to Marcus Smart's comments. I do not think Boston should trade him. I don't think he should want out of there. I don't think anything. I just think that this is sort of like the Dwight Howard AD situation, where it's early and guys are a little testy about losing. Guys are a little concerned about where the season is headed. Guys are really concerned. This stage in his career, it's a prime year. He wants to shine. He wants to be in a winning situation. So all of that's understandable. And at the end of the day, when you lose a game like that against a rival, when you were up big, and you're gonna see them in the playoffs, and they got some momentum about themselves, you don't want to lose this game. You don't know if you're gonna see them down the road. So I can understand Marcus Smart. A lot of what he's saying is about passion for the season and wanting ultimately the Celtics to win. So no concern here. No concern now. The media may blow it out of proportion, but I have a weird feeling they're kind of going to take it the way I'm taking it too, because at the end of the day, we all know Marcus Smart is just a passionate player who wants to win. This is not a situation where somebody's going to be demanding out. I don't think so. So that's what I want to say about that, man. But the Chicago Bulls are still winning games. I think they're 5-1. They're beating teams that they're supposed to beat. They're beating teams that you would argue they're not. I told you guys that I thought they were one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference, so I'm not surprised by their hot start or anything. But nevertheless, it is encouraging to see that when Pat Will went down, they didn't skip a beat. And granted, they shouldn't have, because he ain't been there. But it's just the point. Like, their rotation is so solid that I don't even know that missing Pat Will early on is going to be something that they feel. They're just rolling. They're just rolling, and it's all about health. I'm still paying attention to Zach LaVine and that thumb. But all in all, they look good. And I gotta send some shout outs to DeMar DeRozan, because I got on his case saying that he was forcing a shot last time and that those shots should be going to Zach LaVine and Vucevic because they're the 1 and 2. But DeMar DeRozan is still establishing himself on that team and scoring 35, 37 points. I don't think he sees himself as no number 3. So they're going to be vying for that position. Obviously, Zach is 1. I do believe Vucevic is a solid set in stone too, but DeMar DeRozan is a star in this league, and obviously he ain't ready to slow down at all. So I love seeing him in a Chicago uniform. It's much better than seeing him in San Antonio. Just being real. And I love what they got going on. Their backcourt is one of my favorites in all of basketball, because those are two guys that I believe in, two guys that the Lakers have had for years. So, you talk about Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso. I mean, that's just a perfect storm for a Laker fan. So you basically got fans over here rooting for you, Chicago, because we love those two guys. And DeMar DeRozan's one of ours too. So it's a lot of good energy in this house for what the Chicago Bulls got going on down there. Still Lakers for life. Don't get it twisted. But yeah, we like what we see there. At least I do. I speak for myself. But yeah, man, AC, stealing the ball down the stretch was something I remember seeing him do quite in that game, seeing it live, and he's just making a serious impact, man. Defensively, offensively, facilitating. If he was a Celtic right now, Marcus Smart wouldn't be upset. That's the type of thing we're talking about. AC brought that to that team. And, of course, Lonzo Ball is the ultimate, in my opinion. So, they went from having no facilitators for like 5 years straight immediately to having 2. And you see how they've turned it around? Direct correlation. That's essentially what this video is all about. Boston needs that. My name is BDF44. Thank y'all for watching.